Has Russia just tried to fix Romania's presidential election? On the 24th of November, the country went to the polls for the first round of voting. However, in a shock result, the runoff will include a largely unknown far-right candidate. Amidst claims of social media manipulation, there have been calls both in Romania and abroad for an investigation into the allegations. So, just what exactly happened, and why could this have particularly worrying implications for European security? Hello and welcome. If you're new to the channel, my name is James Ker-Lindsay, and here I take an informed look at international relations, conflict, security and statehood. Hybrid warfare has emerged as a critical element of modern international relations. Blending traditional military tactics with non-military strategies such as cyber attacks, propaganda and political interference is becoming an increasingly potent way for states to destabilise their adversaries. One of the most worrying developments is the increasing use of electoral manipulation. Often involving disinformation campaigns conducted through social media, the results can profoundly affect the future not only of countries but of regions and even the international system. Over the past decade, Russia has been accused of using electoral manipulation against numerous Western states. In addition to the 2016 US presidential election and the UK's Brexit referendum, allegations have surfaced in various other countries, including France, Germany and the Baltic states. And it's against this backdrop that claims have now emerged of Russian meddling in Romania, where a far-right outsider scored a stunning victory in the first round of the latest presidential elections. Romania is located in southeast Europe. To its north, it's bordered by Ukraine and Moldova. Meanwhile, Bulgaria lies to its south, Serbia to its southwest, and Hungary to its west. Along its east coast lies the Black Sea, covering approximately 240,000 square kilometres or roughly 92,000 square miles. It's the 12th largest country in Europe. Its population is around 19 million. Predominantly ethnic Romanian, it also has numerous minorities, including Hungarians, Roma, Germans, Ukrainians and Turks. Romania has a semi-presidential system of government that mirrors the French system. While the president appoints the prime minister, who's responsible for setting domestic policy and leading the government, the president has a central role in foreign and security policy. This includes chairing the Supreme Council of National Defence, which brings together leading figures including the foreign, interior and defence ministers, the head of the armed forces and the heads of the intelligence services. Romania has a long and rich history. Having emerged as a significant Roman province in ancient times, it then came under Ottoman Turkish rule during the Middle Ages. However, the modern state emerged in the mid-19th century when the principalities of Wallachia and Moldavia united in 1859. 20 years later, Romania finally achieved complete independence, becoming a full-fledged kingdom in 1881. After the First World War, Romania expanded significantly, adding several important new regions such as Transylvania and Bessarabia, the latter of which is in fact now modern Moldova. Under its wartime dictator Ion Antonescu, Romania initially sided with Nazi Germany before switching to support the Allies in 1944 following a coup led by the king. Despite this, when the war ended, Romania and the rest of Eastern Europe came under Soviet control, and in 1947 the monarchy was abolished and the country became a communist state, the People's Republic of Romania. 15 years later, in 1965, the country fell under the dictatorial rule of Nicolae Ceausescu, who would go on to brutally control the country for the next quarter of a century. This eventually came to an end in 1989. Inspired by the revolution sweeping Eastern Europe, Romanians rose up against Ceausescu. Having been captured trying to flee the country, Ceausescu and his wife were hastily tried and executed on December the 25th, 1989. The end of communist rule ushered in what appeared to be a new era for the country. In 1990, Ion Iliescu, a former senior member of the Romanian Communist Party who'd fallen out with Ceausescu, became the country's president. leading the Social Democratic Party, which would become a dominant force in the country's politics even to this day. Iliescu soon faced criticism on various fronts. In addition to his slow economic and political reforms, he was accused of maintaining elements of the despised communist-era structures. As a result, in 1996, Iliescu was defeated by a coalition of centre-right parties. But while the new administration tried to introduce changes, the country remained dogged by various problems, including deep-rooted corruption. As a result, in 2000, Iliescu returned to power for a second presidential term. But despite concerns over Iliescu's leadership, Romania nevertheless made significant progress towards Euro-Atlantic integration over the next few years. In 2004, it joined NATO, thereby strengthening its role in Western security. That said, a few months later, Iliescu was again forced from office, losing the presidential election to Traian Băsescu, the leader of the centre-right Democratic Party. Strongly pro-Western, Băsescu introduced many measures to crack down on the country's corruption. As a result, in 2007, Romania finally joined the European Union alongside neighbouring Bulgaria. However, Băsescu's aggressive style of politics led to problems. Having been suspended by Parliament for overstepping his authority, he faced an unsuccessful impeachment referendum before being reinstated to office. Eventually, he stepped down after 10 years in power at the end of his second term. After many years of political instability, Romania appeared to turn a page in 2014 when Klaus Iohannis, leader of the centre-right National Liberal Party, became president. A member of the country's German minority, he was seen as a safe pair of hands. But despite being re-elected in 2019, his term produced mixed results. On the domestic front, he faced several controversies. This included a backlash to his decision to endorse a coalition between his party and the PSD, a move that many said legitimised the country's corrupt old guard. But against this, under his watch, Romania strengthened its place both in NATO and the European Union. This became particularly marked following Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. From the start, Romania supported its neighbour. In addition to providing military aid, it sent humanitarian assistance and was a crucial route for Ukrainian grain exports and for refugees fleeing the fighting. Meanwhile, Iohannis spoke out strongly against Russian aggression and reinforced Romania's commitments both to NATO and the European Union. And it's against this backdrop, after having served 2 terms in office, that Romania went to the polls on the 24th of November for the first round vote to elect a successor to Iohannis. I hope you're finding this helpful. If so, please do consider giving it a like and perhaps subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. It all really helps. Thanks so much, and now back to the video. But while 13 candidates stood for election, the focus was on the 2 apparent frontrunners, Marcel Ciolacu, the serving Prime Minister and leader of the PSD, and Elena Lasconi, a former journalist and provincial mayor representing a coalition of centrist and centre-right parties. But while Lasconi received 19.17% of the vote, narrowly beating Ciolacu, who came in at 19.15%, the most votes went to an independent candidate, Călin Georgescu, who received 22.95%. These results were nothing less than a political earthquake in Romania. Aside from the fact that this was the very first time since the fall of communism that the PSD candidate hadn't made it to the second round, Georgescu, a 62-year-old agricultural engineer, was known for his extreme views and peddling conspiracy theories. As well as praising the country's Second World War pro-Nazi leadership, he was known to be pro-Russian and anti-NATO. More to the point, he'd spoken out against Romania's support for Ukraine. The result was even more astonishing because his lead had appeared seemingly from nowhere. Polling had consistently shown his support to be less than 10%, behind another far-right candidate who eventually took just 13% of the vote. To this end, attention quickly turned to his social media activity, particularly TikTok, where numerous accounts appeared to have amplified his videos. This quickly led to suspicions of a coordinated effort to manipulate public opinion, with the finger of blame been firmly pointed at Russia. While the Kremlin has vehemently denied the allegations, the outcome of the first round of voting has nevertheless led to considerable concern, both within Romania and abroad. Internally, the effects have been strongly felt. Amidst widespread protests, calls have emerged for an investigation into Georgescu's funding. Meanwhile, President Iohannis convened the Supreme Council of Defence to analyse possible national security risks arising from state and non-state actors. Likewise, there's been considerable concern abroad. While many of Romania's NATO and EU partners are treading cautiously, not wanting to be seen as interfering in elections in another member, they're nevertheless watching the situation closely. That said, some others have been more forthright. In Brussels, the head of the centrist Liberal group at the European Parliament has called on TikTok's CEO to come before European lawmakers to address the allegations. At the same time, the result has been greeted with concern in neighbouring Moldova, which retains close cultural and linguistic ties to Romania. Having also faced recent allegations of Russian electoral manipulation, its pro-European president, Maia Sandu, has said that the two countries cannot let the Kremlin dictate their relationship. So, where do things stand at the moment? While an appeal to the Constitutional Court on a separate technical matter led to a recount, the justices found no evidence of fraud, thus opening the way for the second round to be held as planned. As the 8th of December second round approaches, many are naturally concerned about what will happen next. Georgescu's advancement to the runoff has certainly unsettled many. If he wins, opponents fear that his presidency could shift Romania's foreign policy away from the EU and NATO, aligning it more closely with Russian interests, not least of all by cutting off support to Ukraine. More broadly, any shift towards Russia would be another significant blow to both NATO and the European Union, especially as neighbouring Hungary and Slovakia have become steadily closer to Moscow. All this raises the worrying prospect of a disruptive bloc emerging that unites 3 of the 4 NATO members that neighbour Ukraine. Of course, optimists will point out that while such a bloc within a bloc would certainly be worrying, there's little immediate reason to worry. It seems highly unlikely that Georgescu will win the majority needed to take office. This may be true, especially as parliamentary elections held the weekend after the presidential poll saw the PSD win the largest share of the vote ahead of the far right. Then again, in a more general sense, and taken with support for another far-right candidate who secured around 13% of the vote, this suggests that up to a third of the electorate support nationalist populist figures. Regardless of what happens next, the results raise some critical points. If Moscow is indeed implicated, and there's currently no firm evidence to suggest that it was, it would again signal Russia's willingness to use electoral manipulation to undermine the West. Once more, Moscow will have weaponised democracy against itself. All this will again underscore the urgency of strengthening cyber defences, combating online disinformation, and ensuring the integrity of democratic processes. But in a more general sense, and regardless of whether Russia was involved or not, the vote will have highlighted other significant trends. First, it underscores the power of social media to shape political processes, often in unexpected and disruptive ways. Secondly, and as seen elsewhere, far-right views have become more and more mainstream and seem to resonate with worryingly large parts of society. With or without Russian interference, all this again raises some crucial questions about the future of liberal democracy. I hope you found that useful. If so, here's another video that you might find interesting. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video.